Good day, everyone, and welcome to this presentation for my JLZ 300 exam equivalent assignment. My name is Yasin Goolam Hoosen. My student number is u21428060, and I've chosen a grade 7 lesson, a grade 7 mathematics lesson on the order of operations. And we all know we call that order of operations BODMAS. This presentation goes into the relevance of JLZ 300 in my teaching practice. Before we begin, I just want to highlight the importance that JLZ 300 has in this curriculum. I think that it is important that all teachers have the 21st century teaching skills, and communication is at the forefront of that. And without further ado, let us get into it. Beginning first with instructional communication. Instructional communication, as we've learned in JLZ, answers this question. It answers the question, does my lesson promote the transmission of information between me and my learners? And does that facilitate learners? In my lesson, I used an example. I said to the learners, do you put on your socks after you put on your shoes? And the learners obviously will be quite surprised by that question, quite engaged, because that is quite a weird question to ask. Who puts on their socks after their shoes? And then I asked myself, does that promote the transmission of information? Yes, it does. Because it engages learners, it's relatable, and it's something that they do every day, they get dressed every day. And does that promote learning? Yes, it does. Because my learners think about what they do and the order they do it. And that sparks a curiosity. Where is this lesson going? Learners' curiosity alone is not enough. Now I need to ask myself, how am I going to deliver this lesson? What tone am I going to use? How am I going to project my voice? And will it be delivered in a manner that is clear and understandable? So what I've done and what I will do going forward in my teaching practice is utilize a clever classroom layout. I don't want any child to feel that they're sitting in the corner and cannot hear the teacher in the front. All my students should be able to hear me. The way I utilize my voice, the projection, and the manner in which I get it to all four corners of the classroom is so important, as we've learned in this module. When I'm standing in the front of the class and delivering my lesson, all learners should be able to see my language, and that includes my body language and my facial expressions. And through that, I want to show my learners enthusiasm and eagerness to teach them these new concepts and to introduce them to mathematics and encourage that spark and fire and desire within them for mathematics. I'm constantly asking myself, can I use a hand gesture? When I'm writing numbers on the board, can I show those with my finger? And those are things I'm actively doing in the delivery of my lessons. Those are strategies I've learned through JLZ 300. Delivering the lesson is my duty to perform as the teacher. But what happens when I sit in this classroom with diverse learners with different needs, language barriers, and different learning styles? It's up to me to integrate that classroom. I need to choose cleverly my words and the nature of my delivery. Can I utilize this classroom as a space where instructional communication is effective? I want to bond with my learners. I want them to be able to come to me when they need help, but I also want to maintain professionalism. I want to consider this example. How do I lead conversation in the classroom? I want learners to engage and talk to each other, but they need to maintain respect for one another. So when I ask them a question, it is my expectation and how I will lead as a teacher that they raise their hand, speak, and then let their learners speak. I want my students to acknowledge each other's different and differing opinions. And through that, I can create an environment where instructional communication is effective. We can also consider the classroom as a social space. It is not a space for individuals, it is a shared space. It is a space where many diverse and different learners share an environment. How will I manage the space as a teacher? As a teacher, I want to cleverly utilize authority. I want to maintain high levels of control while encouraging trust from learners, encouraging them to be able to do their work by themselves and for themselves. I will promote engagement in the classroom. I will promote connections between peers and peer learning, because that is one of the most effective learning means. What does this look like in practice in the classroom setting? Let's look at some examples from my lesson plan for this assignment. I want learners to mark each other's work. This promotes engagement between learners and they learn more about one another through that conversation that's had, while keeping them focused on marking mathematics and meeting those lesson objectives. I also will engage learners to challenge each other's thoughts and opinions. When we're having classroom discussions, I will not always tell them that this is right and this is wrong. I want them to engage with each other and almost embrace their differences and their differing opinions and be able to respect that it's okay to disagree, even in the field of mathematics. Another example that I'll use in my lesson is when disruptions happen in the classroom. How do I deal with that? Am I going to draw all attention to the disruption? I don't want to do that. I will not do that. I want to draw attention away from the classroom, focus on lesson objectives. I don't want that disruption to become the center of attention. I need to manage the classroom as a social space where social events like disruptions might happen and might occur. And in those situations, I need to keep my learners focused and alert and ready to adapt to that, whilst not losing focus of the lesson outcomes. I'm also well aware that in the social space, I have learners from diverse backgrounds and cultures. I have learners with different personalities from different situations. My words need to be clear and almost basic so that learners can always be able to grasp what I'm saying. My examples need to be inclusive and relatable for all learners. My learners need to be encouraged and able to acknowledge and respect each other's differences. Consider the example of an anecdote where I describe a plane flying away. Not all students have been on a plane, and I need to acknowledge that and be clever with the examples and anecdotes that I use. My choice of words need to cater for all students. They need to be respectful in that classroom environment to all my students, embracing their differences and the diversity within the classroom. In the case of this lesson plan, when I delivered it in my practicals, as I compared it to in my write-up, I had a student with special needs who is just as capable as every other student and required a Braille worksheet. And that requires further preparation from the teacher, from me. And I need to go that extra mile to deliver a lesson that this student can also engage in, because they have every right, just as every other student in the classroom, to that lesson. I need to consider my examples. Are they relatable? Do they embrace diversity? The example of the socks and shoes. That is relatable for all students. It doesn't offend any student. I need to think, do all my students have access to socks and shoes? And if they don't, how might this example affect them? And how might that affect my lesson outcomes? Another thing I need to do is ensure respect in the classroom environment. I am the teacher, and hopefully that means I'm adult enough to embrace diversity and embrace differences. But among learners who are not necessarily have that experience with diversity and differences, can they do that? Can I foster a classroom environment? And the answer has to be yes. I have to ensure that students are respectful to one another, that they raise their hands when they speak, that they speak to each other with respect and speak to me with respect. But also, when they're engaging with one another and I see something that is disrespectful or out of pocket, how am I going to address that? I need to be able to tell learners that this is how we behave, whilst also teaching the content of mathematics. I need to teach behavior and teach learners to embrace diversity in that social space in the classroom. As I conclude, I just want to reiterate the importance of communication as the most important 21st century skill for teachers. It is the main method for lesson delivery and the most important tool that we have to utilize. I have learned the most valuable skills and theories from JLZ that I will take with me into my career. I have learned how to communicate effectively, different types of communication, and how to create an inclusive and manage the diversity within a classroom. And those are skills that are so valuable to me and that I will take with me going forward. I do anticipate challenges. I do anticipate a necessity for the skills I've learned. I'm sure in my journey and my career as a teacher, I may find myself in unfamiliar situations. I will deal with diverse students with different communication styles, different learning styles, different needs and situations. Consider the example of a student who cannot read or write. I'm better equipped to deal with that situation through the theories I've learned in JLZ. Consider a student who may not speak to me because I'm a male educator and we have different cultural beliefs. How do I show that student that it's okay to come to me with a question, despite their cultural beliefs and what they grew up believing was the norm? What do I do in the event of a classroom disruption? Do I have the skills to deal with it? Through JLZ, I've learned not to draw attention to classroom disruptions, to look after the classroom as a social setting, as a social space. And these are skills that I will take with me. Skills of how to react, how to communicate effectively, how to manage the classroom. JLZ 300 has equipped me in the best way possible with these skills. And as I conclude, I just want to extend my thanks. My thanks for the module of JLZ and the team behind it. My thanks for the content and the value that it adds to my life and to my career. This module has been valuable in the most amazing way. And I cannot say enough, But thank you, and thank you for considering my presentation.